CI0 to 1 or even 2 was a long journey for me. That was 2 inches of skin, to get any kind of slack at all. And so at that point in time, you're still circumcised. Sex is just thrusting. It's friction until the synapses all align and you reach orgasm. But it's very unpleasant for a female partner with all that friction.
The Intact Again podcast is an oral history project where we share stories from those who have been circumcised and are working to restore what was taken from us. Our hope is to inspire each other with our collective stories of loss and recovery.
Welcome back to the Intact Again podcast. This is part 2 of a 3-part series on Estimato, the inventor of manual methods. If you haven't checked out the first part, I definitely recommend it. In that episode, he talks about how he invented manual methods back in 1968 and how a doctor even threatened to commit him because he had the audacity to complain about being circumcised and having painful erections. But in this episode, his goals have changed. He's already fixed having painful erections, but now he's actually trying to grow a foreskin. And he's not alone this time because he discovers other people also trying to regrow a foreskin. So without further ado, let's listen to the ongoing saga of Estimato, the inventor of manual methods, part 2.
We were born with one. It's there for a reason. Every single mammal on Earth has one.
I remember somebody making the point, why would a creator create us with foreskin only to make us cut it off?
Exactly. That's where my religion stops. I tell people I'm not religious. I'm not religious at all. I do not partake in any church. There are points in all of the religions that I disagree with on a fundamental basis. I'm a highly spiritual person. I believe I had a creator. I'm not sure what his name was or is because there's a bunch of different versions, but every single religion has a creator in it. Even science says that at some point there's something created this big bang or whatever. It's just such a magnificent creation. Us, the earth in its unique spot, third rock from the sun, the universe, the way it sits, the way it's expanding, how it has existed for billions and billions of years. And it just makes me appreciative of whatever you want to call it. Karma, creation, nature. It's bigger than we are.
And the foreskin is a part of that, so it makes sense to want to get it back.
Exactly. Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but you've been in contact with Andre of Andre's method, and you're grateful for him popularizing manual techniques before you had a larger presence on the internet.
Andre's method is a variation of manual method 3. If you look in foreskinrestoration.org, up at the very top, the guy that wrote it all, his username is Tally, Tally. He's a guy that latched on to manual methods, probably because it was in foreskinrestoration.org. It's been in there for years. It's been there since the early 2000s. I don't remember when they put it in there, but they put it all in there. And before the Reddit had even been invented, this guy, he latched on to manual method 3. He tells everybody what he did and how he did it. But that was all in the mid 2000s, late 2000s. I mean, that was all that came 20 years later. That's a variation of manual method 3. And that's beginning to become known. He really made a good name for himself because, I didn't even show up in Reddit until 2020. He's been a tremendous success. And what he does works well.
And he's been contacting you.
He has contacted me. And he's like, oh, yeah. And there's a thread in there, too, where Rod Lau said, oh, yeah, I remember that.
So both Ron Lau, the creator of the TLC Tugger, and Tally, the creator of restoringforeskin.org, recognized you from the pre-internet days?
Yeah. They go, oh, yeah. We remember talking to you about this. Yeah. And we didn't know that Estimato was the guy we talked to back in the 90s. Yeah.
Could you talk about the science that came out in the mid 2000s that validates the techniques you discovered?
Yeah. Our whole body is electrically connected. The piezo one electrical response in a cell. When you tug two cells apart, that trigger trips, and the positive and the negative get pulled apart, and it switches. And when it stays switched long enough, it will grow another cell in between the two that were split apart in the space between them. It does the same exact thing if you squash them together. It will kill a cell. That's how fat people shrink. Our skin stretches and it shrinks. But that was something I ran across. And I went, that validates my point that when you pull these two places apart, you grow new cells. All the time before, I thought I was just stretching again. We thought we were stretching it. But it's not stretching. It's not elastic. I mean, it has elasticity, but you're actually growing new cells in between. And those are permanent until you squash them back together again long enough for them to decide to kill that cell. This is a scientific white paper. The piezo one becomes triggered in a few minutes and lasts about an hour. Those are their exact words. They didn't say 3 minutes. They didn't say 2 minutes. They didn't say 5 minutes. They said a few minutes and last about an hour. How unscientific is that? I mean, I'm an engineer. I have to have precise data. And here they have a paper that says a few minutes and about an hour.
It is kind of funny.
So what's a few minutes? Well, we think few is 3. Well, me being a scientist, a little bit, more of an engineer, a builder, a person who makes things, if 3 is enough, assuming a few is 3, if 3 is enough, what, 2 more minutes? You gonna kill yourself over 2 minutes? No. You can last 5 minutes. That way you're sure you triggered it. Very similar. A little bit of over engineering, yeah. And I'm giving people advice. What if I told them 2 and it wasn't enough? They'd all be working at 2 and it wouldn't be working. So let's go 5. And 5 is a good number. Anybody can last 5 minutes. You do get some hand fatigue, but you'll develop the ability to withstand that, with practice. And goodness knows we practiced this for years. And you can stand 5 minutes. And then basically, if it lasts about an hour, we'll do it again in an hour. And I've got a schedule that I've published a couple of times to people in comments. If they don't know how to figure out how to do it 6 times a day or 12 times a day or whatever, I could show you how to do that. So basically, you do it as soon as you wake up before you get out of bed, 5 minutes. Then you go get your coffee, you eat your breakfast, whatever it is you do in the morning, you should shower and shave. Does that take an hour? Go do it again. Then you go to work. As soon as you get to work, if you work in an office, run to the bathroom, tug again. Then at 9:00, do you get a break? Go tug again. Bring a big water bottle with the gradations on the side of it that says This is how much water you're supposed to drink by noon. This is how much you're supposed to drink all day. And if you have a water bottle like that and people know you're hydrating, if you jump up and run to the bathroom every once in a while, even in a crowded office, nobody says a word about a well hydrated man. They just go, oh, well, he's hydrated. Good for him. And you run off and you can tug, and you don't have to go to the bathroom if you don't need to. You tug. And then you do it at lunch. You do it at afternoon break. You do it when you get back home, before you go home. I live in a metroplex where the commute is usually an hour if you commute to work. So you tug before you leave. You commute home. You tug when you get home. And then you're home. You tug whenever you want. And I can show people where they can get all the tugs they need in one day. The thing that makes you be able to grow your foreskin is the thing that's the best for you. Whether it's manual methods, whether it's a device of some sort, doesn't matter how it is. As long as you get one, that's all I care about.
Hey guys, it's Open Roads, and I wanted to break in for a second to tell you the good news. We have officially broken our first goal of 5,000 downloads. Originally, we had hoped to get to 5,000 downloads by our 15th episode, but we got there after only 10. Thank you to everyone who is listening to and sharing the episodes with others. We have lots of new stuff coming, so keep coming back and help us break our next goal of 10,000 downloads.
There's two things I'm curious about, because I know you took 2 big breaks, but your first foray into restoring, what CI level did you get to, and what were the little gifts you got from restoring the first jaunt into it?
I got to about CI3, and that took about 4.5, 5 years for me to do that because I was experimenting. I didn't have a guide, just figuring out what worked. So I got to about CI3. And by that time, you think about that puts you into the 70s. And then, I met my wife, and sex was very pleasurable. I never had the dead stick syndrome that people talk about. No, sex was great, and erections didn't hurt. So I was very appreciative of that. That was a great gift, to have that.
We think of all the things that connect to one's sex life, and reversing one's circumcision is only one part of it. It's also important the relationships that we're able to have because we have, well, the fact that you didn't have painful erections anymore. I'm sure that helped things out in that department.
Absolutely, because then you could procreate, and I proceeded to do so in the 80s. Well, I actually started in the 70s, but my first child was born in the 70s, and we ended up with 3 biological children. It was pleasurable. It was fun.
On a kind of a related note about gaining your body back, when did you get into being a multi-orgasmic man and the Taoism and all that? Was that around the 80s or the 70s or?
That was in the 80s. Yeah. You know, uh, since you mentioned that, there was a magazine called Penthouse back then. They had letters in the back and they had articles, very interesting articles, Playboy too. Of course, me looking at those magazines was a big secret, not from my wife. She knew I looked at them. She said, I can't believe you're looking at that pornography. But they were very interesting. There was articles in there. And of course, me being a voracious reader, I read all those things. And I found out that there was the ability to train yourself to have more than one orgasm. There was the ability to train yourself to stay erect for hours on end. So I learned to do that. Of course, back then, the whole deal was that you were supposed to be able to have sex for an hour or more. And I did. It wasn't hard for me to do that at all. I was very happy with the pleasurable sensations now that I didn't have that tight skin and I had the full erection that I was supposed to have.
When did you start up restoring again?
Around 2000. I did it off and on, when it was convenient. But, I was always a manual tugger. So it was just, you just did it when you got a chance, and you could do it nearly anywhere. CI0 to 1 or even 2 was a long journey for me. That was 2 inches of skin, to get any kind of slack at all. And so at that point in time, you're still circumcised. Sex is just thrusting. It's friction until the synapses all align and you reach orgasm. But it's very unpleasant for a female partner with all that friction. When I got to 3, well, I had flack skin. You had this little balloon of skin hanging over the edge of your corona or at the edge of your corona. And still at that time, there's a little bit of glide there, but the friction is less. You've got, a little bit of glide because, the base of your penis kind of adheres. If you have a female sexual partner, it adheres to the edge of her vagina, and, it gets sticky there and it sticks. And so you've got this glide inside of that skin tube. But it's very short, it's only half an inch or so. It's not much at all. And that takes place until you reach CI4. And then when you get 4, you actually have skin that goes over the top of your corona. Well, it's an entirely new sensation. That's totally strange and different. And then that just gets better as you hit CI5, it's CI6. But by the time you get to 7, there's a good inch and a half, 2 inches sometimes, depending on your penis size, of course, of flexible glide. And that glide just increases. And then by the time you get to 9, I can almost pull my scar line, which is at the tip of my penis, to the base of my penis, almost. Not quite. I can't quite get there. I'm a little short. That's why I think I need to go to 10 or 11 or 12. I've seen intact guys, they get erect, they have coverage while erect, and they grab the tip of that penis and they start retracting the foreskin. Usually they only retract it an inch or so, about to where our scar line is at this time, or where most of us were. But some of those guys can retract that foreskin all the way to the base of their penis. So they can have penetrative intercourse totally within their own skin. And then if they need a little bit of different, they can retract it and push it in the way a circumcised man would. And that's totally different sensation. Absolutely. It's different. That glide inside the skin tube. And the sensations of that glide inside the skin tube are all you need. You don't really need another partner to do anything because the sensations are internal.
I've often felt about circumcision. They're robbing us of ourselves.
Yes, absolutely robbing us of ourselves. Not only our autonomy, but a basic primal pleasure in nature. We were created with the desire to procreate. And in order to procreate, it needs to be pleasurable. I mean, you could do it if it's a chore, but you don't really want to. And that's something that's built into us. All of the animal kingdom is driven to procreate. And I believe that drive is from a pleasure center in the brain.
I'm curious, could you talk about your battle with hair?
Oh, yeah. When I started growing hair, I grew the kind of hair that most people have over their pubic area, all the way down to my scar. I had hair follicles sticking out of my scar. So I was hairy all the way. So I had about an inch and a half of shaft skin that was hair bearing follicles in it. It was hairy. When I started tugging, that skin pretty much kind of thinned out of my scar. I was growing skin out from underneath my scar. That's when I started doing MM2, which was manual method 2. That was the very reason I started doing that, was because I had hair all the way up to my scar, when it was only an inch or an inch and a half of the shaft, well, that wasn't so bad. But then when I got married, that hair irritated my wife, and so, we tried to shave it. Well, that was even worse because stubble is worse than hair. And so as I was tugging, I started tugging directly over that scar, and I was growing less hair follicle skin out from underneath that scar. And I did some electrolysis for her comfort. I had all that hair removed. I've had that hair removed twice to get rid of shaft hair. But that's why I counsel people to tug directly on the scar line, because you can grow less hairy skin out from underneath that scar. You're not really sure at what point did they cut you. Some people do have scrotum skin all the way up to their scar. You get what you tug. I mean, if you're going to tug, you might as well tug what you want. New cells grow in the area of tension. If you're tugging scrotal skin, you're getting more scrotal skin and you're going to have hair in it. So you have to start with the end in mind. You have to have a goal. You have to think about those things before you start.
How has this changed how you feel about your body?
Oh, I accept my body as it is now. I've always considered myself fat. I played football when I was young. I've always been the big guy, not necessarily tall. I'm only 5'11", 5'10". I'm 5'10". Sorry. Let's get that straight. So I'm not tall, but I'm heavy. And it took me years to learn to appreciate what I bring to the table. I always felt inferior. I always felt detached somehow. And I attribute that to being circumcised. I was never whole. And now I'm very, very close to being whole.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Intact Again podcast, but there's still more to come. In the next and final episode, where we interview Estimato, he discusses his journey to full coverage and the physical and emotional benefits of being fully covered. He also gives us a fascinating glimpse into the early years of the foreskin restoration community. Here's a little bit from the next episode.
If I had known that it would feel this good now, back then, I would never have taken a 10-year break. I would have just gotten it done. I would have just buckled down and tugged like crazy till I was done.
This podcast is hosted by Dick Guyver, edited by Open Roads, and promoted by Turkish Restore. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit subscribe and share it with your friends. We also need your help to keep this podcast going. For as little as $3 a month, you can help us pay for the podcast hosting and inspire others in their foreskin restoration journeys.